We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
With the news that American journalists have been killed in Ukraine, is it possible to see parallels between what's happening today and what took place in Vietnam? Reporters numbering up to 600 covered the wins, losses, and tragedies of that conflict, and to some extent shaped the way Americans understood the war, and ultimately the decision to finally withdraw. Now, to discuss the historical perspective of this, of journalism in the war zones, we're joined by author and podcast host, Mr. Jeff Charles, to get his perspective on this. Welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
So, Jeff, the first question has to be about what's happening today. We read that at least 2 journalists working for Fox News have been tragically killed. But how many reporters are on the ground there? And perhaps more importantly, what kind of coverage are we getting?
Well, and that is the interesting thing about living in 2022, Mark. I mean, like Andrew Breitbart said a while ago, if you have a phone that has a camera on it and you can video record, you can be a journalist. And that is literally true. You don't necessarily have to work for a big box media outlet. If you can record something and upload it to the internet, you are engaging in journalism. So the answer to your question, Mark, is that there's no way to know, because we've got information coming from a variety of different sources, and they're not necessarily part of our mainstream media outlets.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Jeff, because you see when you watch the mainstream news channels, the cable news channels, etc., and they're using footage, but the footage often has those 2 little sidebars at the edges, which means that somebody was recording that on a mobile device. And so this is information they're getting coming in from all different sources. Now, you and I, we track social media perhaps more than most for our sins. And what I'm seeing is a major surge in polarization. Now, I want to get into what's causing this. Now, could it be a reaction to anti-globalism? For example, the mindset that the major globalist players all agree upon one thing, so therefore it has to be bad for freedom in general. That's one side of the polarized debate. And there's the other side that is obviously very pro-Ukraine, very pro-Zelensky, who's doing a fantastic job, by the way. So is it a little of this, or is it something else what's creating the division?
Well, the answer to that question, Mark, is yes. It's a little bit of what you just said and a lot of other factors. I think the key word in your question is the word reaction. I think a lot of people are being reactionaries. Usually that's a label that's applied to the right, but that's not the case. I mean, you've got people on the right reacting, you got people on the left reacting. I mean, you've got people saying, if there's any reporting that's negative towards Putin, then that means that they want to drag us into a war, which isn't necessarily true. Although there are people who would love for us to send troops into Ukraine. So I think it's just a lot of different viewpoints. And this is one of the downsides to the democratization of journalism. When everybody has a camera, then you have a lot of different viewpoints, and it's hard to discern what's really going on.
Yeah, there's a new phrase going around. A picture paints 1,000 words, but launches 10,000 blog articles. Now, Facebook recently updated its rules on allowable hate speech to include actual calls for violence against the Russian military and Russian leaders. Now, do you think this it was a policy change? Do you think this policy change spells the end of any pretense of impartiality from big tech and the social media giants?
No, I don't, Mark. I don't think it portends the end of pretense for impartiality, because that actually happened a long time ago. Like if you were to go on Facebook right now and make a threat against former President Donald Trump, do you think that they would take that down? Probably not. I mean, they already allow some pretty unsavory characters on their platform, yet Trump is not allowed to be on there. The same goes for Twitter too. So I think they took that mask off a long time ago, Mark, and I don't think they're going to be putting it back on. Yeah, they'll pay lip service to the idea of impartiality, but it's always with a wink and with their fingers crossed behind their back. Nobody actually believes that they're impartial anymore.
Okay, let's discuss Vietnam briefly that I mentioned in the introduction here. I feel that the pictures that we saw coming out of that war, they shaped public consciousness in such a way that the images that we saw, they're still as powerful today as they were back then. And I wonder if we as a society are a little too polarized for that now. See, every picture I see online, it's, as you point out, it's accompanied by refutations and reactions, or by people putting spin on them rather than just engaging in for what it is. It's a photo of a devastated home, a devastated apartment building, a devastated hospital. So much of the reactions is likely Russian propaganda because they are experts in the field. But is there something else at play as well?
Oh, yes, I do. I mean, like you said, I do believe that a lot of it is Russian propaganda, but I think a lot of it, Mark, are just people who have a narrative that they want to adhere to and one that they want to perpetuate. There are still a lot of people who are very much pro-Putin, and so they're going to call lies on anything that they think is against Russia. And to be fair, I mean, there's some of that coming from Ukraine as well. I mean, regardless of which side you fall on, we live in the information age. So a lot of this war is being fought on the interwebs, and it is a social media type of battle. I mean, you mentioned Vietnam. Yeah, you and I can remember those pictures, even though neither of us were even born back then, even from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They are iconic, but back then there was still a level of agreement as to who the enemy was, who the bad guy was. Here, it's a mixed bag because everybody has a voice. So that's one of the things that makes it hard to know what's propaganda and what's the truth. Like, you almost have to be trained, like people like you and I, Mark, because we do this for a living, but the average person isn't trained to be able to spot these things. So that's also causing a bit of an issue as well.
Yeah, I see your point there, Jeff. Right. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Remember, you can tune in for Liberty Nation from 2 to 3 p.m. on Sundays on KBKW 103.5 FM, 1450 AM, the talk of Grays Harbor. Down the road, we talk liberty with Scott Cosenza to figure out what's happening with the controversial legislation coming out of Florida. But up next, is constitutional carry gaining ground in America? We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.